Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Sanders, and this is Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection. Today, what I wanted to talk about, the idea I'm going to talk about the very best watches. And then, I thought, well, what are the best watches? And if somebody said, we'll give you one watch and you can choose the very best one around, I'd probably pick one by Philippe Dufour or Roger Smith or Kari Vuitton or one of those. But then, first of all, there aren't very many of those. And so I thought, well, instead, what I'll do is try to identify certain things that the very best watches have. And so that's what we're going to do, and we'll treat today as part one. I don't know how many parts this will have because I keep finding some interesting things. Now, one of the things that somebody had said, he said, what was it, something, 99% of the people don't care about movements and who are watch collectors. They don't care about those things and all of this kind of detail. This is what they care about. So, at first I was like, you're nuts. But then I thought about it. In 1947, right after World War II, there were in Hollister, California, there were some group of motorcycle guys who got into a great big fight in this little town of Hollister, and sort of took it over and made a big mess of it. And so everyone was all excited about this. And the American Motorcycle Association said only 1% of the motorcyclists are the bad kind. And so what happened was that some of the outlaw bikers started calling themselves the one percenters. They even have a little, I found a little one percenter thing. And probably the most famous of these is Hell's Angels. So I thought, well, we'll be the one percenters of the horological set and enjoy finding out about movements and those kinds of things. So let's take a look. Now, I started off with a Ferdinand Berthold, and one of the things that one of his watches had is called a Maltese cross that's used as a stopwork. Now, what that means is that this particular one stops the barrel at a certain point. And the point is this, is that we've talked about this before. Springs, initially, they got a lot of power, but then as they unwind, the power goes. And this image there shows a curve, and there's sort of an optimum range where the spring is sort of unwound, so it's not really fast, but it's not all the way done, so it's really slow. And it's usually runs about the first, if you cut off the first 20% and the last 20%, you have sort of this sweet spot in between. And one of the things that's used is called a Maltese cross stopwork. And I found this Ferdinand Berthold, which is an excellent watch. This is, again, when we look at these, we find really excellent watches. The big problem is that we can't afford them for the most part. Still good to know about them because maybe we'll find one with one of these features that we can afford. All right, let's go on. Now, next thing I wanted to talk about were double barrels. And there's two main types, actually there are three types of double barrels. The first one is a serial double barrel. And what the serial double barrel does is that it extends the charge of the wind. You wind it up, and when one barrel is unwound all the way, the other one kicks in, and so you have a much longer wind on it. Now, this is one of the watches that has that serial double barrel, and it's the Christopher Ward SH21. And that's the movement and they make several of them. And a serial double barrels they're not considered really that fancy, but they're nice. I mean, there's something, you put in double barrels, you have a longer charge on your watch. That's a nice thing. That's a good thing. So that's one of the things that we might look for. Now, the good thing about Christopher Ward, this particular watch that I have pictured there is around $1,800, and with an in-house movement and so forth. So that's one little place we can find it. Now, the second type of double barrels, this is where you find it in your better watches. Here are two. One is an Irish watch called the McGonagall, and both barrels are used to power the same movement, and so they tend to be thinner because the movement is right in there with the barrels, the one that they're both turning, and it tends to smooth things out. The picture to the right is a FP Journe chronomet. It's oh boy, what was it? I forgot what the number was on it, but it's caliber 1304, and the 1304 is used on the Chronomet Blue, the Chronomet Cervane, the Chronomet Holland, all of the chronomets, the basic chronomets that use that 1304 on there, and you can see the double barrels, and then you can see that gear in the middle that is used for, let me think, it looks like a winding gear, and that winds them both up. And then when it unwinds, you can see that the one gear sticking out there at about 3 o'clock from this angle, and it moves everything. Now, where this is really helpful is where you have a lot of functions added to it. And in the FP Journe, it's time only. So here's one right here. It's just the time, and the only thing it really runs is the hour, minute, and second hands plus the power reserve indicator. All right, so that's parallel double barrels. Now the next one is really interesting, and it's double barrels with multiple gear trains. And what this is and this is a Jaeger-LeCoultre duometry chronograph. And what it has is that you have these two barrels, you wind it up, and this is a hand-wound movement in here. You wind it up, and the double barrels serve, one of them runs a gear train to keep the time, and the other one runs a gear train to run the chronograph. So that's a pretty special one. Now, these watches cost around $45,000. And again, that's one of the things you're going to find on these really good watches is you're going to find a lot of very expensive. The hard part is finding one that has some of these features, but it's not very expensive. Not too easy to do. Okay, so we have the double barrels, we have the three types, the serial, parallel, and then the ones with the multiple gear trains on it. Okay, now this next group is a Remontois Égalité. Essentially, I think in modern watchmaking, and that's the last, well, basically in the new millennial and 21st century, what you have, F.P. Journe basing his work on Breguet and Daniels, and in fact, I think it's John Harrison, Englishman, who actually first used a spring-based Remontois on a watch. And what this does is that as your mainspring unwinds, in order to have a steady force, it winds up this little thing called a Remontois. Every few seconds, it'll wind it up, and then it unwinds and regulates one of the going train gears or the escapement. They have different ways of doing it. And this is the FP Journe Chronomet Optimum. It's the hand-wound watch. Now, FP Journe's not the only one that has quite a few watches with a remontoire. And they're all expensive. All right, they're all really good. One of my favorite is the Langenheim Conrad up in the upper left corner there. And you can't see it here. You have to get a close-up of it, but you can see it right next to the escapement wheel. And it winds and unwinds at a regular rate so that there's a constant force with it. A newer one that I really like a lot is a Gronfeld 1941. And it's in the lower left there. And that's a beautiful watch. I saw them when we were in New York at Cellini's. Beautiful watches. And they have the remontoire at 9 o'clock. The differences in the remontoires they can be significant, but they're all based on the same concept of creating a constant force by the mainspring winding and allowing to unwind a smaller spring. Gruberel Force has one called the differential d'égalité. And when we were talking to Stephen Force, I asked him about the remontoire, not their remontoire, because to be honest, I didn't even realize they had one. But I said, the remontoire is one that is really good for steadying out, for a constant force and in a mechanical watch. And I said, why is it that more watchmakers don't use it? And he said, it's really hard. It's really hard to make. The one they created was called the differential d'égalité, and they use a remontoire, and then they have another gear, governing gear, and you can see it right below the small seconds at about 5 o'clock on that watch in the upper right up there. Finally, this is by Andreas Steller. It's a caliber Satterell, I believe. And it is a remontoire that is, again, with the escapement. Each one of these has a little different feature to it. Andreas Streller made an earlier one that seemed to be a lot more complicated and a lot bigger. This newer one, the caliber Satterell, is just really beautiful. Both it and the Gronfeld, I like them all. They're the ones, the Langenheim, the Gronfeld, and the Streller. All of those are pretty much time-only watches. I think that there may be a hand calendar with a Conrad or the Heinrich, both using what the Langenheim referred to as caliber 5 on that. Now, finally, this last one is the Jaeger-LeCoultre Geophysique True Second. Now, this is a remontoire that only deals with one thing and really doesn't smooth out the whole movement, but it's a very interesting one. With it has a fairly standard 4 hertz movement in it. I think every other one that we looked at had 3 hertz or less. So this is a fairly standard movement that you find most places, in most watches. And what they did that was really interesting, they pointed out there are 8 ticks per second with a 4 hertz movement, with a 4 hertz frequency. And what they have is that I guess, is that every 8 ticks, um, they have the remontoire kicks the second hand around. Normally, I think the second hand goes on the fourth wheel or one of the going train gears. But this one has it has the jumping seconds, which is the normal for a quartz, but for a mechanical watch, it's sort of takes a little different. They have a movement called the JLC 770 that works with it, and up at the top they have the most interesting looking balance wheel. It doesn't even look like a wheel. It looks like this sort of a double T over a balance spring. The remontoire is you can see that in the upper left part of the picture there, and then the lower right, that the spring there is the remontoire for the to kick around. It kicks the second hand around. Anyway, well, listen. This is another watch it's about $10,000. I mean, it's not really low. I mean, it's not down there with the price wise with the Christopher Ward. But in terms, two things here. One, I think that if we're going to talk about, you want to get the best watch you got to know about the movement. I don't think you have to know about the advertising agency, as what some people do, or sort of like, oh, well, my friend said, this is the best watch in the world. Well, maybe it is, but unless your friend knows something about watches, how would they know? So I'm wondering, first of all, of the people who are into horology, how many really care? Maybe that guy who said 99% could care less about the movements and some of the real horology. And maybe he's right. I mean, maybe it's just this 1% who finds it interesting. To me, it is what horology watch collection is all about. To others, it may be very different than that. Anyway, I'd like to hear your feedback on that. Any ideas you have about either the multiple barrels or the remontoires of different types that are used? There's some other things too. When we look at the very best watches, I think it's important for us to look at these features and say, hey, let's see if we can find a good one for ourselves. Okay, well, listen, like I said, really like to hear from you. It's an invitation to subscribe if you'd like. And until Sunday, we're going to have another collection review I think you're going to like. This is Bill Sanders for Watch Outside, the Art and Science of Watch Collection. And for our live streaming on Saturday, let's talk about the one percenters. Hope to see you then.